I'm doing this video at the end of the process. I've already been a day doing the starter, doing the dough, doing the shaping and overnight resting, and now I'm baking the first loaf. So I'll do an intro video right now with kind of what I've covered over the past day. These are all little tips that I use that just make the process for me a little smoother. I don't try to do a better job or even replicate what other really good videos do with the entire baking process. Those are way better produced than I could ever do. So just mine is like a little filler. The three sites that I use, I started baking sourdough based on Joshua Weissman, the really great chef. I think he's based in California. Quite sure he is actually, In-N-Out Burgers. So he got me going on sourdough. I then added the Bread Code, which is a German software engineer, Hendrik. Fantastic videos, all kinds of good tips, really good production quality. And then the third is Food Geek. There's a gentleman named Sun, who's a Danish chef and guitar player, evidently. I can see from his guitars in the background. And his thing is testing, so he'll do something 3 ways and then show you what the results are. Super useful. There are lots of sourdough channels out there. Go for it. There's just tons and tons. I only have so much time. I rely on those 3. So this is at the end. I just wanted to talk about a couple things. I use a combo cooker. You can see the cast iron combo cooker. I find it works great. Lots of ways to do bread. You could put the vapor basin in. You can put the glass bowl on the top. Lots of people do it. I find this one is just sort of cheaper, simpler, old school. It works well. And what else? Timers. So I time everything. So I'm in Vancouver, Canada. It's 9:32 a.m. I'm making this video. I put this bread in at 9:20, 12 minutes ago. So I'll cook it for 20 minutes at 500 Fahrenheit. Canada metric, but the product is from the US, so Fahrenheit. I cook for 20 minutes. I set a timer up. I have an iPhone. I also have an Android, and I just set a timer up automatically. I speak into my phone, set up a timer for 20 minutes. It'll go off in 20 minutes, and it'll save me a lot of trouble. When I do the stretch and folds, I do those pretty meticulously. So 3 times 15 minutes, 3 times 30 minutes. I set up 6 timers verbally. I hold down the record button in my iPhone or Android and just say, I do it 6 times, set a timer for 15 minutes, and then I know it by heart. I do another button, set a timer for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, hour 15, hour 45, 2 hours for 15 minutes. Those timers are invaluable to me, and I'd suggest that you do the same thing. It takes no time to do it. Those are all the tips I've got here at the end. So I'll get on with the tips that I started doing yesterday, and best of luck with your baking. I've made a ton of bread. I've watched all the videos. Not all, but you know what I mean, on YouTube from fantastic bread bakers. And what I'm going to do, I'm not going to recreate everything those guys do, or women. I'm going to just talk about some little tips that just make the process a lot simpler. Okay, first, get yourself a scale. Don't rely on cups and quarts and ounces and stuff like that. Get a scale. You need to do that. 880 grams of flour. The recipe I use is 880 grams of flour, 600 grams of just warm water. And your bread flour is going to have different absorption rates. So you'll learn what water to flour ratio works for you. I'm going to use 880 to 600. I think that's just below 70. For me, that works best for my flour. Bread flour, you'll hear about strong flour or hard flour, something like that, high protein flour. Bread flour has over a 15% proportion of protein to the overall weight. More protein is better. If you're using AP flour, that'll work, but it won't be as kind of tight and chewy as the bread flour will make. You can buy gluten, by the way. Bob's Red Mill, you can find it in most of the stores. Just add that. Again, if you've got a scale, if you know that your bread protein percentage, which you can find on the back of every package, is 13 or 14%, you want to get it to 14 or 15 or 16%, use your scale, use a calculator, figure out what 1 or 2% of your total weight is, add that much gluten to your flour. Okay, I bake a lot, so I've got this big bin of flour. I live in Canada, Vancouver, Canada. There is a 20, I think it's a 20 kilo, maybe 40 kilo bag from Costco, from, I think it's Rogers Mill. It's hard Alberta wheat, called Silver Star, and I'm swearing by that stuff now. It's fantastic. So, you know, find yourself a nice bread with the absorption rates. By the way, just make some breads. Keep notes. Keep good track of how much water your bread flour takes, to produce a consistency that you like, and then stick with it. Just take notes on that and try, you know, 60%, 65%, 68%, 70%, 72, until you get the percentage that you like. All right. Second little tip to make the life a little bit easier: put a tea towel or something down on the table that you're doing the bread on. If you have a granite tabletop that you know, like they show in the videos, these guys with you know, flour all over the place, super easy cleanup. I don't. I've got just a normal manufactured tabletop. Put a small towel down. It just collects all the flour. Is going to get all over the place, and I really hate cleaning it up after you get this big gunky washcloth that's getting kind of cloudy and white after. So I put down a tea towel. With flour, you'll hear about the hydration period, or autolysis, I don't know. That works. So what I would do is I will put the 600 grams of flour in here, mix it all up. It'll be what they call shaggy, which is just very loose dough. You know, you can pull it apart and it breaks. If you let that water and flour mix sit for 30 minutes, an hour, hour and a half, all the way, even overnight, what'll happen is the water will interact with the gluten and the enzymes in the flour, and the gluten strands will naturally come together and create a much more dense network. So I would absolutely let the water just mix with your flour. You know, at least 30 minutes, but ideally several hours. In the videos, I think you'll see the individuals talk about 4 or 5 hours, even overnight. Okay, absolutely, and you can tell that just by pull the window pane test, pull the batter or dough apart at the beginning, and then maybe every half an hour until it stretches like cellophane, and at that point it's perfect. Note that and just continue to use that all the time. Okay. Hot water or water temperature that you put in, if you put very hot water, it will actually destroy the enzymes that are required to produce the really chewy bread. So don't put in cold water. You want to activate the enzymes. Just warm water, warm to the touch is absolutely fine. You'll find when you first mix the flour with the water, you'll get clumps. And what I would do is take a whisk before and just whisk this up and break up any clumps. Then when you're mixing, when I mix, I actually use my hands and I break down the clumps as much as I can. And then when you're doing the stretch and fold later, I actually rub the surface of the bread and break out any clumps. And that, I don't know if that helps, but that's what I do, and it kind of makes me feel better. I start my bread not early in the morning. I find that I need an overnight rest, and if I get up super early and make my bread at like 5 a.m., then it goes into the fridge at like 3 in the afternoon. And then by the time I get up the next day, it's been sitting there like 14, 15 hours. It's over fermented. So I actually, it's 10 o'clock in the morning right now. I'm just starting this process out. I'm gonna probably put this into the fridge for the overnight rise late, like 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. And then when I get up the next morning, you know, I get up early, but let's say I start to bake at 7, 8, 9. And I preheat the oven and all that stuff. The bread's been fermenting like 8, 9, 10 hours, which is, I find typically pretty good, okay? So you don't want to over-ferment. If you over-ferment your bread, the acid proportion builds and your bread just flops like a pancake. So you want it nice and tight and not over-acidified. That's all I've got for the moment. And as I go through this process, I won't film all the bread making. I'm just gonna call out the little things that I do that I think improves the process. I've added the water. You can see I overshot a little bit, 22 grams. I work in grams, not ounces and stuff. Grams, so much easier. Like a kilo of flour is equal to a kilo of water in weight, right? So it's a 1-to-1 proportion versus a gallon of this and, you know, pints and ounces. Well, I can't figure that stuff out. If you were really anal, you could put a bit more, you could put more flour in to maintain the hydration level. So this is about 60% of hydration. I could put in probably 30 grams of flour, and I'll do that. Get it up to 650, and that'll maintain the hydration percentage. Okay, that's good enough. So I'll leave that there. So many little tips I just keep thinking of. When you're baking, if you do bake a lot flour, you'll have a big flour thing like this probably. I really like to keep a separate small container, a lidded container with flour. You're always using it to top things up or to dust things, so I like having that around. Another little tip, you'll be using the same bowl probably for the mixing and then the bulk fermentation, stretch and folds and all that stuff. And if you, it takes hours and hours to do this. So at the end, if you haven't cleaned the bowl sides nicely, they'll be hardened dough, which is really hard to get off. So I would take the time as you're mixing this stuff in the early stages, just to clean the side of the bowl down. And you won't get it perfect, but you'll get most of the gunk away. And then I find when I do the stretch and folds, I do this. I use a little bit of water to lift the bread off out of the pan and or the bowl. And I find that the stretch and fold process, I need a little bit of water, so I kind of do the same thing with a bit of water on the sides, and it cleans off the side of the bowl. All right, so I'm going to mix this up by hand now, and like I said, kind of use my thumb and fingers to get rid of the clumps. Another tip, these little things keep popping up as I'm making the bread. I use a hard spatula. The rubber ones bend and they could break, so I use a wooden spatula because I like to use it to get, you know, around the edges of the bowl. And then you need another device to scrape all the dough off. I find I've got a flat spatula, and I just use a flat knife, bread knife, just to scrape all that off. I would do it two-handed, but I'm filming with one hand, so it's a bit awkward. To support my point before about having a tea towel down, look, I've already got flour all over the place. The whisk. I also was talking about the butter knife is great. Once you've done this, you know, the clump thing, and you've not kneaded, but if you've mixed up the flour with your hands are totally full of gunk. The butter knife is kind of a nice precision tool to get all the gunk off. And then, like I said already, the dough is hardened. It's only been about 3 minutes, so if you can't get that off fast right away, that is beneficial to you. A plastic scraper. It's round, so if you wanted to, you could go a little bit faster, maybe with this. I use this when I do the stretch and folds later on. I wet this and then just get all the gunk off the side of the bowl. And then you'll absolutely need a bench scraper for when you do the forming, shaping later on. Get those. Those two will make your life much easier. When you're using your hands to kind of declump the flour, that's also referred to as the Rubaud method, R-U-B-A-U-D. If you watch the Joshua Weissman sourdough, he mentions that. There are other videos that talk about it. The more popular sourdough bakers, I don't recall them ever mentioning this, but all it is, I think it's a way to declump the dough, quite honestly. So I think it aerates the flour nicely. It gets because you're handling and massaging the dough quite heavily. It's getting the water and the flours to mix very well, and you're declumping. So that's the benefit of the Rubaud, R-U-B-A-U-D method. This has been sitting about an hour and a half, and I've mixed it up a little bit, but I just wanted to show you the importance of this autolyse process. Like, look at that. This dough is hardly breaking open at all. So I think probably another hour of this, call it 2 hours, 2.5 hours, and this dough will be in really good shape. You can, as you begin to bake more, you'll get a sense for dough. You'll come a point where you'll go, oh, this is really good dough, because it's so elastic, it's so silky and smooth and soft that you can't wait to start to work with it. And this dough is getting there. It's still a little bit sticky and a little bit shaky, but I can feel it getting there. So that's another tip. Just get to know how your dough feels, and when it's elastic and silky, as they say in the recipes, you'll get a good feeling for for what they're talking about. And I can tell now there are very few clumps in here. So this, better for later on, right? I won't have to try and massage those clumps out. There's been a couple hours. The dough is really smooth, really elasticy, and it's time to mix in the starter. And you can see it's doubled. I'll use that bread knife to scrape around the insides, and you can, like I said before, I'm going to leave this this tea towel out the entire time, and I'll have like no cleanup. I'll just rinse it off in the sink and throw it into the machine. And I didn't do it because I know the process very well, but Hendrik at the Bread Code, super smart system. He puts a rubber band around his the see-through vessel with his starter, and he puts it at the top of the starter before it ferments, and then when it doubles, you know clearly that is doubled, right? So the rubber band is super. And there's another tip that he uses, and I'll talk about that later. Talk about starters. You can get up super early and get your starter going. I tend to do it the night before. I put in a small amount of starter into a vessel with a 50-50 mix of flour and water, and then I let that sit overnight. Actually, I just did it like that overnight, and then by the time you're ready to bake, almost any time the next morning, like 12 hours later, you're going to have a nice sourdough starter. So that's doubled overnight. And if you want to, get up early and put a higher percentage of starter in, and you'll get the same effect. But I like to do it overnight. I've talked to a few bread makers, and they said it like a stiff starter, like a hydration less than 50%, probably better. And if you do it overnight with a little bit of sourdough starter, you arguably get a nicer yeast or starter. I don't know what's best. Just either works is what I'm saying. I like the overnight because I don't need to get up early and mess with my starter. I can just do it anytime and let it sit, and it's generally ready whenever you're ready. Okay, moving on. Another tip. I'm ready to mix the starter in with the dough. I want to talk about baker's math. You've probably heard that term if you've been looking up lots of videos. Baker's math is basically the proportion of different ingredients to each other. So the starting one is the hydration level. So for 100 grams of flour, you would have 70 grams of water, which would be 70% hydration. And that's kind of what you're aiming for with bread dough. And like I said before, you might go higher or lower depending on the absorption rate of the particular flour that you're buying, because it will change. Higher protein, higher, stronger, harder bread flours are more thirsty, and they can take a lot more water. Okay, so now, tip. So be aware, know your baker's math. Baker's math of starter to flour is 20%. So I've got 880 grams of flour. I need 180 grams of starter. I think that's 20. Yeah, it's about 20%, a little bit less. So 180 times 5, reverse of 20%, is 900. So that's about 880 grams. So there you go. I have starter that is 233 grams. Why did I do that? Because I will put 180 grams of this into the dough, and I'll leave 50 grams, and that becomes my new starter for next time. So I will put that back in the fridge, and then I'll use that the next time I bake. So I don't feed my starter because I bake every week or two. If you're baking every couple of weeks, even longer, you could leave, just as I did, you could leave that in the fridge, stay cold, and then depending how old it is, you might need to put it through 1 or 2 rejuvenations. So this starter is about 2 weeks old. I mixed it last night with the flour water mix, and it was perfect this morning. So I know for sure at least a couple of weeks a starter can live, and I've revived starters after months. So you just need to let them wait longer at room temperature, and you might have to wait a day, 2 days, and then you'll probably have to revive them, like refresh them a couple times by taking a portion of the starter, putting it into fresh water flour mix, and then just kind of rebuilding the population. So it might take you 2-3 days to revive an old starter, but you can do it. You just need to give it time, and it will work out. In here, this case, you saw before my battery timed out. I think about 230 grams of starter. So I've got 180 going in here, 50 retained, and that will be my starter for the next time I bake. All right, so I've added exactly 180 grams of starter into my dough, and there's what's left. It's a nice, healthy chunk. I could probably, what I'll do is clean this up. I'll move it to another jar just to clean it up. And then what I'll probably do, there's a good amount in there, but I'll probably add maybe another 50 grams of flour and water, and just get that and let it sit for an hour or two. Let the bacteria, or sorry, the yeast start to work. And then pop it in the fridge, and then it'll slowly do its work over the next week or two. So when you bring it out, it'll be perfectly ready to go. More tips. I like to keep a little bowl of water handy for my hands when I'm mixing the dough in with the starter, because your hands get all sticky. But if you do keep them wet, you're adding a little bit of water in here, which is good, because the dough does feel a little bit stiff. I think it could take more water. And more hydration, by the way, gives you a fluffier loaf. That's why they if you can do higher hydration bread, it's favored. So I'll keep that there, and I'll just use it to clean my hands off while I mix the dough in. All right, my tea towel is serving its purpose. It's really messy here, but the tea towel has captured virtually everything. I didn't mention in the last video, but the reason for overdoing your starter is that you don't need to feed your starter that way. It's like you've already fed it, right? So it's already, the starter's already fully alive, and you now add more water, flour, and there you go. You fed your starter and you're ready to go. So you save a step. So what I'm going to do now is just clean off the side of the bowl. So I've got a little bowl of water that I used for my hands before, and I'll just go around and with the wet scraper just get all the gunk down. Okay, another good tip just to help keep things clean. So many tips I didn't realize. When I make a starter, I like to put the water and the old starter together, and then I mix that up and fully break up the starter into the water. So at that point, I know that when I mix the flour in with the liquefied starter, it'll just mix in really super evenly. Another benefit to putting the water in is you can kind of clean off the edges of the jar nicely and clean it up a little bit. All right, the bench scraper is super helpful because you can just pick up all the gunk. I've already done the first, not stretch and fold, but the first mixings. I use Joshua Weissman for his process for this part. So I do 2 slap and folds, as he calls them. And I add the salt mixture that I showed before in between the two. So I've already done the slap and folds, and this thing is ready to, the bread is ready to get, go through the 6 multi, okay, another tip, baker's math, 2% of the flour weight is salt. I use sea salt, so that's 18 grams. Weigh that out. And then what I do is I add just enough water to suspend it in, there we go, 18. I'll put just a little water in just to break it up, because when it goes into the flour, it's hard, so I like to soften it up. If you do the slap and folds, and I do, I haven't done a control test to see if they help, but I kind of think they must. It's just a bit easier to leave the bowl inverted over the bread or the dough at this point. So let me lift that up. And then, just a little bit easier. You don't have to scrape out the bowl, etc. It saves you a bit of time. And then after I did it the last time, I scraped everything up and kind of shaped the ball using the shaping method that you've seen in the videos. But a big question is always, well, how do you know if the dough is too thick or too thin, too shaggy or too stiff? I think when you start to do the slap and folds, if you can pull it back and lift it up with a minimal of residue on the board, I think that's just fine. This is just leaving a teeny bit of residue, as you can see, and I think that's just about perfect. Okay, so I do these stretch or slap and folds. I'm doing it one-handed, so I can't do it too long. I do that for a couple of minutes, and you can really feel the dough begin to change in consistency. It starts out maybe kind of soft, but then as you do a stretch and fold, it does become a lot more elastic, and then it starts to loosen up. So when it starts to loosen up, that's when I feel that it's, I've done it as much as I can, and I let it sit. So this is the second stretch and fold that I've done. So I'm gonna let this now. I'm gonna start the slap and fold. Sorry, not stretch and fold. I'm gonna now start the stretch and folds. I do 3 every 15 minutes and then 3 every 30 minutes. and those are all pretty straightforward. I'll do one and just show you kind of what I do. Another tip, if you use the oven to keep your dough warm, don't let it get too warm. What'll happen is the dough will get runny, and I found that you really can't thicken it up or harden it up again. Once it's kind of runny, it's just kind of runny forever, basically. So if you're using the oven, just be careful. Just make it a little warm, and that's it. All right, the optimal temperature for this stretching and folding is 78. So this is a little bit cool. I'm going to put it into a slightly warm oven, and hopefully it'll come up to 78. Then that'd be 21 Celsius. And there, it's been in the a warm oven for 15 minutes, so it's already coming up. And then, like I said, I wet my plastic bench scraper and then use it to, well, first I clean the gunk off the sides. By the time I finish all the stretch and folds, it's quite clean. Get it wet, wet because it doesn't stick to the dough, so I use both sides till it's loose, and then I just do the stretch and folds, and I don't do anything special. So then I won't video now until I get to the pre-shaping and all that. I've done all the stretch and folds, no tips from there, but now I'm doing the bulk fermentation where the dough needs to double. So rather than trying to watch it in the whole mass in the big bowl, this is from Hendrick at the Bread Code. Just take a little sample of your dough, pop it into a glass, get it as flat as you can, and cover it, and then I'll cover it later, but then watch this to see when it doubles. When it's doubled, you know the big one's doubled. So there it is with a rubber band, so you'll know when it's doubled, and I'm just going to throw this little cap on there. Right, I like to shape, this is, it's done the bulk ferment, so I like to shape it up a little bit into a shape that's easy to cut. I put water on my scraper, a little flour on the top, and then I do like to get the measurement just right. So after I cut it, I do weigh it. So I'm just gonna pop this in and weigh it and then adjust as needed. So I've got the two loaves pre-shaped. They've sat here for half an hour. No other tips from here, you know. For tonight, I'll let them sit overnight, but it is 10:20 at night right now. I'll get them in the fridge, and then by the time I get down here in the morning, they'll probably be ready to bake. And again, I'm doing this because I don't like to let it over ferment in the fridge. Little tip, I throw a couple ice cubes in my my Dutch oven just to create the vapor, and that seems to work great. Getting the bread ready to go into the Dutch oven. I like to, you can put flour in the bottom of the Dutch oven, but I just put a little bit on the bread in the thing here, and then I just use a little brush and I get it all nice and covered up, and that minimizes the amount of flour that I need to use, and it ensures that the the bread's all neatly dried up on the surface where the wet dough would otherwise hit the super hot pan. Okay. There's the first loaf out, and I like to make sure that my crust is nice and brown. Otherwise, it kind of compresses when you go to slice it. One problem I've been trying to work on is I just don't get a nice ear on here, as you can see. I've got an ear before, but for the life of me, I can't figure out how to recreate that. So the Bread Code, Hendrick suggested that a 450 Fahrenheit bake would allow the insides of the bread to come out more slowly and will produce the ear. So what I did was, this loaf was baked at 500, and then I cut it down to 450 after 20 minutes. Now the oven's at 450, I'll bake the second loaf, which is here, and just see if I get a better ear. And it's kind of the benefit of doing different sorts of tests. And this is where Soon at Food Geek comes in, and also Hendrick's super helpful. They've tried different things. What happens when you do the bulk fermentation for 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours, etc.? What happens to the final product? So this bread has been, I stopped videoing last night about 10 o'clock my time. I put it in at 9 a.m. So that was an 11-hour rise. Now the second one's going to be a 12-hour rise because I baked it for almost an hour. So we'll see if there's any difference. There's my slash, and you can see it's quite, there's an ear. I do it on a 45-degree angle. That's what they always recommend. I did a little bit more on the side this time. I made sure I didn't spray water in there, so let's see how this goes. So there's the ear on that, a little bit better. I do note that this is the hot part of the oven to the front, so the cooler part was this way, and there is a bit of an ear. So I do think temperature has something to do with it. So I'll compare it to the one that I just did. They're different shapes. I have different throat forms. And there are the two. So this one was the cooler, 450 Fahrenheit. That was 500. Cool down. But you know, they're both beautiful loaves of bread, right? So no complaints whatsoever. Anyways, hey, that was fun making this video, everybody. Hope you got something.